Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Good morning, and or good afternoon, depending, I guess, where you are in the world and in the nation. Today, we're going to be talking about after action reviews and why they're important for you and your organization. First couple of housekeeping notes today. One is top 10 business continuity today has made the top 10 business continuity podcasts that you must follow in 2021. I'm very honored to be number one on that list from FeedSpot, that is. And they have an algorithm and they have 25 experts that go through and they find us. So I'm very humbled and thank you all for making this a successful podcast. There is a sad note that I have to bring in as well today. Dr. Dennis Moletti, who is a legend in emergency management and specifically in communications, has passed due to COVID. And I am putting together a post for him. I know that you can find some more information if you go to the natural hazards.colorado.edu. There they have a very nice write-up about him. I'm going to be doing something as well. I actually had some personal interaction with Dr. Moletti when I was working for the city of Dana Point, and he came down, helped us create messaging for our EPZ, our emergency planning zone, for the nuclear power plant that we had in our backyard. He worked with Dana Point, the County of Orange, San Clemente, and San Capistrano to create this our communications plan. It was really awesome working with him. He definitely is a legend during this time, and of course, he is already missed gratefully by all of us, I think. That being said, let's move into what we're talking about today. So, after action reviews, exactly what they are and why do we need them, and do you conduct an after action review after a crisis and or exercises? And as the impacts of disasters and crises, they stay with us long after the event, right? We talk about the idea of recovery and how it could be long-term, right? It's short-term recovery, long-term recovery. And if you take a look at some areas that have been hit by disaster, some of 10, 20 years ago, they're still not fully recovered from where they were then, right? And we can get into the idea, we talked about the idea of normalcy and whatnot, but we're talking about the recovery process and how the after-action review helps us out. So what do we do with this? So we take a look at this. We take a look at the actions that we did. We write these down. We write these big reports in some cases, or in some cases, people don't do them at all. And why is it important? Well, this process of the after action review helps organizations identify areas that they need for improvement. And this is what, if you think of it in this way, that every single event that we do, there is always going to be areas of improvement, right? We just talked about Dr. Moletti with communications, and it always seems to be communications is on there as a problem. Right. And so why does it seem to be always on there as a problem? Because we create these after action reviews and we don't take the steps that go with them to fix these events. And I'll tell you another personal story with after action reviews. I created an after action review after an exercise for an organization that I was doing some work for. And in here, I put some of their areas of improvement. And I got pushback by the client, and they asked me to remove some of those areas of improvement. And I said, well, this is what I found. These are our findings. And they said, well, if it's on the paper, that means we're going to have to put money into it and make it happen. I had to just shake my head and was like, okay, I'm going to give this to you in a Word document. I'm not going to put my name to it. And if you want to change it, that's up to you. But the thing is that this is what this is for. This is why we do those after action reviews. So what can you do to respond and recover from such events? And what lessons do you learn each time that you can mitigate your losses? And that's what the important part of it is. So let's walk through a couple things. Let's talk through plan triggers. And Well, let me rewind here a bit. And the disaster that we're talking about, normally it's we're talking about this all hazard approach, but I think in this case here, let's discuss what it would be like, say, for a hurricane, right? Because hurricanes are one of those things that we can plan for something to come. When I say plan, we see it coming down a week, maybe more in the ocean, and going to hit us. Now, I know this doesn't really affect people with earthquakes and stuff like this, but the concepts are still there. So please just bear out with this. So, what do? We have planned triggers, right? We have evacuation teams, and we have communications of the areas where we need to really think about, right? So, what triggers your plan? What is the thing that really makes you get going, right? And so what we use is the concept of operation condition levels, right? And or you see this here with the pandemic, like what are the conditions on here, and where do we hit those triggers? So generally, these plans are used by by government level, by governments, but you can use this as well in business, right? And so what you're doing here is you're better position yourself to coordinate for these events and decision making. All right, this is why you have those planned triggers. All right, and so I think it's important that when you know what your triggers are, everybody's trained to those, and so when you execute those, you're able to do it in a timely fashion. The other thing that you should talk about too is specifically in a hurricane or maybe even in a wildland fires is evacuation teams, right? Do you have a pre-planned evacuation team, right? Well, some of us may debate the timing and effectiveness, right, of the evacuation orders. The fact remains that there are orders that come through that we need to evacuate. So things like schools closings, transportation routes, if we're doing lane reversals, all these things you have to understand what's happening in your area. So also understanding, do you have a place to go, and when you go to those places, do you have your supplies set up there? Are you able to get your business continuity? This is part of the business continuity plan here, everybody, is when you go to the other site, do you have the things that you need to still be working? And that's part of your evacuation team. You can break your evacuation team up into moving the business or moving the organization from one location to the other. And then you can also have the other sides of it as being your advanced team, which is going over to your new location and getting that set up so you can have still operations going. Or maybe you're just doing remote operations. What does that look like for you? And you should have that all laid out. And on the communications, right? Does your team have redundant communication methods? As the phone lines go down, the towers go down, the internet services are disrupted, can you still communicate? What are you using for those backup communication needs? I have to say here that this is a good place where you can put Titan HST into your plan with mesh networking and being able to use the program to be able to still communicate when all these other systems are failing due to how the mesh works, right? And so having these times will save you time, will save you money, and also have a positive impact on your team. Just knowing that you have that robust two-way communication system in place in case everything else fails. So after the disaster is over, right? The fire has gone through, the hurricane has gone through, right? Let's look at the reentry passes, right? Do you have communication with the county, the state, the local jurisdiction, wherever you're working with, to be able to reenter into the area? Do you already have people pre-identified who's allowed to go in there, that have IDs that identify them, that they have the right to go back to those areas? Right. And then you can be working that with your local jurisdiction to make sure that they recognize who you are and what you're doing. If you are with the government, do you have the right credentials to be able to go back in? Right. And then operation tempo, right? Does your plan include predetermined meeting times, conference calls, communication updates to employees and customers, maintaining an efficient and predictable schedule for daily operations to help everyone to find some structure after that disaster, because it is very disrupting, right? When you have to evacuate, get out, and move back in. So you need to really create that structure, and you do this with your operation tempo. Right, decision making is more effective when team members can plan to collect the necessary information for the meeting. So having those times set when those meetings will happen will help with that, and also help with the discussion to make sure that they're prepared for those. And in the worst case plans, does your plan account for scenarios like people, facilities, communications, and technology and operations failing completely? right? We've seen some very devastating impacts of fires, say, for instance, in Paradise, where the 65% of the city or the town was destroyed. Does your plan work for that worst case scenario as well? And then you take that after the disaster is over, you take all this information, you put this into your after action review, you take a look at how did that impact your operations, and then where you failed, right? And what you did good, and then you adjust and you address those areas that need to be shored up a little bit, right? And so that's the importance of the after action review. So assemble your team, right? And review each area and above, right? And in addition, to see how everybody performed during the storm or during this disaster, and then develop your list of actions to address each of those and track them through regular monthly meetings until you have fully recovered from the event. So, that being said, thank you so much, everybody, for listening to us today. And please visit Titan HST for your IQ communication needs. And remember, follow us on your favorite podcast player, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and join us next week. Until then, stay safe and stay hydrated.